I think it's part of the Confucian family culture. I think education has always been to the forefront.
Wow, it all comes down to education then.
I think to a large extent, education and an intact family, because your parents are your cheerleaders, and you know, little children, why should I learn my 5 times table? But if the parents want you to, you do, but not because you understand, but because you love them and they love you. So I think an intact family and education is an enormous advantage.
Is that what many people are calling the Asian value?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think you have a family value, and from the value of family value, you create a communitarian value. This is not necessarily communist, that's state-sponsored cooperation. This is family-driven cooperation. And 80% of all the companies in the world are started by families. I mean, they may become public companies after a bit, and they may take on shareholders later, but they start as family-sponsored companies.
One noticeable trend we're seeing worldwide is the formation of regional blocks.
Yeah.
It's a good compromise between, I guess, globalization and nationalism, and we're seeing that pop up everywhere. And East Asia, there's talk of an East Asian community as well, but obviously there are very many differences that need to be resolved in order for that to happen. What are your prospects on that?
Well, I wish you luck. I think the European Union is a sort of a mixed blessing, but I mean, perhaps the most important thing about the European Union is there hasn't been 50 years of peace in Europe since Roman times, if you look back. And there has now been, since 1945, 70 or nearly 70 years of peace. This is a first. I mean, France and Germany have fought regularly. So I think the biggest dividend is peace. I think when you form an economic union, it's like you have an umbilical cord to all other countries. And if you attack another country, you attack yourself. And I also think that peaceful economic competition is the moral equivalent of war. You know, you always needed war so that one country would rise and another country would fall. But I think different levels of economic development have become, you know, the form of idealism, the form of excitement, the form of danger that war used to. I mean, war produced all these ideals. It produced the most appalling destruction as well. And here we have a non-destructive form of enterprise and excitement for human beings. So I think economic development is the new litmus test of nations.
You do believe it is in the best interest of East Asia to form such an economic union?
I think so. I would let much more freedom into it than the European Union, I think, legislates too much on workers' hours and things like that. I think you should leave more to the market than the European Union does.
Well, especially in East Asia, China is at the center of attention. What are your thoughts on China? The role it's playing now, the direction it's taking, and where it's headed? Well,
I think it's very exciting, and it's very adventurous. I am fascinated by what I call whole system change. In the West, we change by increments. Every company puts forward an idea, and this is often destructive, and it's often disruptive, and it's often opposed by government or by other companies joining together to stop you. And I think what China is at least capable of is changing whole systems at the same time. Suppose you wanted a hydrogen car. You can't have a hydrogen car if there's no hydrogen stations. You have to rewrite the training manual for mechanics. You have to have different garages. You have to change everything at the same time, because if you have a 1,000-mile journey in a truck, you have to fill up with hydrogen at one end and at the other end. And I think what China is able to do is to create whole systems and change about 10 variables at the same time. So if we're going to build a better world, there are a number of innovations where you're going to have to change about 30 variables at the same time. And I think China could lead the world in that, and with Korea's help, I think you could lead the world in that particular type of change.
Could it also be because of the fact that China is still a communist country?
I think a strong government makes a lot of difference, but you have a strong government in Korea and you have a strong government, especially in Singapore. So the role played by government is fascinating, and one of the big handicaps the West has is this idea that the government that intervenes the least is the best, and everything should be left to the free market.
Well, there's growing belief here, though, in East Asia, where people want less and less government intervention.
Well, you want less policemen on the street. You need less. You don't want tax inspectors looking over your shoulder. But a government can play two roles in a society. It can be a referee who blows the whistle and say, you go to jail, or you've done wrong. And it can be a coach. And if you look at a football match, the referee is always very unpopular. He gets pelted with eggs or tomatoes. But the coach can be very popular. Coaches are the most popular people. So I think governments can look at their better companies. They can look at the opportunities. And they can change the environment so that more innovation takes place, or businesses grow faster. And I think the government as a coach, rather than just a referee, is another of the innovations of this part of the country and of this part of the world. And I think it's exciting, and I'm very interested in what I call industrial policy, which is what can the government do to make an economy grow faster.
Let's talk about innovation now. First of all, how do you define innovation?
Well, innovation is the putting together of two ideas. The two ideas can be quite old. They can be planks of wood or something, but if you create an elegant design out of those standard pieces, one of the favorite toys in the world is Lego. All it is a series of yellow and red bricks, but a child playing on the carpet with parents as an audience can create about 200 different buildings out of these Lego bricks. And now in a toy called Mindstorms, you can build a robot, you can put a program inside it, and you can get the robot to walk using software. So all this begins with a series of red and yellow bricks. So you mustn't think of innovation as being entirely new. Innovation consists of parts that are probably familiar, that are old. Shakespeare didn't use a single word that wasn't known to the people of that time, but it's the way you put the old words together in new forms, or the old elements together in new forms. That is innovation.
To create something new.
Yeah.
Is it something that can be acquired? Is it a quality that a country
well, I think it can be encouraged. I mean, the mystery is there have been golden ages every now and then, all the way through history. And looking back on them, there are certain recurring features. They were very diverse. The Tang dynasty in 7th, 8th century China had about 100,000 foreigners living in China at the time, and it was the end of the Silk Road, so it was a major conjunction of trading routes. So diversity is very important. Education and learning is very important. Sponsors are very important. In Florence, the Medici bankers gave, by modern standards, millions of dollars to people like Michelangelo and Botticelli and even Galileo. So they gave more than money. They took these artists into their families and they played together. So at certain times of history, you've got a kind of interstimulation of like minds, of people fascinated with each other, of people who care more for art or science than for themselves. But it goes as mysteriously as it came. I think Athens lasted 35 years. The Tang dynasty ended in massacres. Florence ended in the